It is Thursday, August 29th, 2024, and I'm here with Chuck West. We're doing an interview with him, and we also have Joyce Kruger here and our videographer, Ken Benedict. And I'm going to start off with asking you the year you were born, Chuck.
1953.
And where were you born?
Bay City, Michigan.
Oh, wow. And who were your parents?
My parents were Steve and Catherine, and we, like a lot of people then, we came to Southern California, the Long Beach area, when I was like 6 or something like that. So I grew up in Long Beach in Southern California primarily.
And what years were they born?
They born? Well, my dad was 10 years older, so 21 and 31.
Okay. Yeah. And how did you end up in Orangevale?
Well, funny story, because I had to ask somebody where Orangevale was. So with my family, we moved up here, with my wife, I should say. I didn't have any kids then. Her family had moved up to this area, not Orangevale, but they were actually in Auburn, and they had a few retail stores. So at that time, I was in Palm Springs, California. I was working for a resort development company there, but she wanted to. She didn't think that was a place that she wanted to, have the family and stuff. So she wanted to move up here to be close to her family, and I was fine. I didn't, I was young. I didn't care. I thought I could get a job doing anything. So that's what I did. We moved up here, and we just stayed in a little house that her parents owned in Meadow Vista, up above Auburn, and then. So I had a resume made up, and I think they were handing them out with every sales receipt that they had in their retail stores, and somehow one of them ended up in the hands of a guy named Ron McRoberts, who also lived up in Auburn, and he was connected to what they then called the Municipal Advisory Council. He was a guy that I think went around to different communities that were kind of. He was like he was a guy that kind of guided people into the government agencies and how to operate and things like that, because he would kind of get a place up and running and then take off and go to another one and stuff like that. But he was here at that time. So he had given my resumes, and then he gave it to a gentleman by the name of Wayne Wright. And so Wayne Wright called me and wanted to talk to me about what was going on here in Orangevale. So I agreed to meet with him, and we went over. He lived on Tonkin way over in Orangevale, and so we just sat on his front porch swing. We didn't, no office, just kind of sat there in his front porch, and he kind of told me. Well, he asked me, what my background was, which was I worked for a resort development company, and I handled primarily. I did a lot of the landscape construction, the swimming pool construction, the outbuildings and bathroom, that kind of stuff, more than the actual condominium construction. I did kind of everything else. So we talked about that, and we sat there for a couple of hours, and then it was like any other, job interview. I'll let you know. and he did. He let me know. When can you start? Kind of a thing. That was in the summer of '83, probably around June or something like that. And so a couple of weeks went by. And anyway, he called me and said that he wanted me to come down and meet with the rest of the. And they weren't the Park District Board at that time. We didn't have a Park District Board. They just had what they called a Municipal Advisory Council. And that council was made up of about 5 or 6 people and who were appointed by the county supervisor. And they were kind of, the county would bounce things off of them if there was going to be a request for development of some kind or something like that. Then these people would provide local input, and they would get the community to either be supportive of it or not supportive of it, and that was kind of their their role. They weren't. Now they're publicly elected, so they stand on their own. But back then they were just appointed, and so I came in and met with the rest of them, and 35 years later, still there.
Who else was on the board?
The original board, the way that I recall, and I did make some notes about it, was I recall it being Wainwright, a lady named Virginia Zabur, another lady named Dorothy Kilgore, and a gentleman by the name of Bob Riley, and another guy by the name of Tony Recchia. He had some sandwich shops called Tony Baloney's. And I believe that was the original. There, I have Joyce Case, my expert, here with me. Of course, Kruger now, but we spent 25 probably years together. So we're like a team. I can't do anything in order to talk about it even without having her here, because she was just as important as I was, and really more so, I think.
And so it started out as you being contracted by this board?
Yeah, I got hired by them. So I technically got hired by the county of Sacramento, but they were the body that I was working with, and Joyce was already there at that time. I think she played a secretarial role to their meetings. She was the. I think she worked at the county or something prior.
Yeah, I worked with the county, and then I volunteered for the Municipal Advisory Council, and that was in 1982. And then the Municipal Advisory Council formed the Park District in June of 1983. And since I was basically volunteering as their secretary, they asked me if I would like the job as secretary for the Park District. And so Ron hired me. That's how I got started.
And so once the Park District was created, what was your official role?
Foreman.
Foreman, okay.
Yeah, I started right at the top. I was the only one. The entire staff was myself, Joyce, and Ron. We were the entire Park District staff at that time. The properties that the Park District had, the Park District only had, other than a bathroom out in the parks, there were a few of those already there, but we didn't own any other buildings other than the youth center that's across the street over here, 6745 Hazel Avenue. That building had been put up in the 50s, and it was kind of the community center of its time. And when we were there, it was just an open hall with a kitchen, and they were doing a thing called Serve Our Seniors out of the kitchen. So it was kind of a busy place. They had a little preschool operation going there, and Serve Our Seniors going out of the kitchen. So we would just kind of put up a card table, I think, and that was about it, And then eventually, myself and Ron and a guy, I think his name was Richard, I think he was the chief of staff, or on the staff of Bill Bryan, who was the county supervisor at that time. The three of us came in and took one portion of the building, the kind of the front right side of the building, because there was another entry door. The place basically had a single door on one side, a double door on the other side that went into the hall. So where the single door was, we went in there and actually framed up a couple of walls and made a separate little, I don't know, probably like a 12 by 12 room. And that we hired a guy named Bob that lived down the street. He was a cabinet maker. Hired him, and he came in and built the little, counter at the front door. So that was because we didn't have any. We didn't have anything else. That was like I say, besides a couple of bathrooms out in the park that were there before we got it. The Park District we didn't have anything else.
So that was their office. That was our office.
Uh-huh.
It was almost this big, maybe cut off that part right there.
Yeah.
So once you guys set up your first office, what was the first order of business?
Well, the first order of business for me was finding the parks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Because I had never been there before, so I just I even had to drive my own truck around. So we went around and looked at where everything was, and mostly, of course, a lot of things that are here today weren't part of the Park District at all, really. But so I just went around and found out where they were. There were different agencies at that time that were doing the maintenance on the parks. The County of Sacramento was providing some services. The Fair Oaks Park District was providing some services to the south end, and primarily, I'd say, about 80% of it was being, the maintenance-wise, was being done by the Sunrise Recreation and Park District, which is in Citrus Heights. They're still there, and so that was first order of business for me, was just seeing what we had. That was first.
And what did you have?
We didn't have very much.
Yeah.
It was basically a lot of at the Orangevale Community Park. There was some development there. The area in the front, there was, it's a different one now, but there was a restroom there that was off Hazel Avenue. There was a restroom that is still there that was off of Filbert Avenue, and then there also was a restroom and a announcer booth combination at the horse arena. It was a different arena than there is now, but at that time, but that was already there. Over at the park at Pecan Avenue, there was a different restroom facility than there is there now. It was an old masonry one that we tore down and put a new one in. And other than that, those were the only other buildings. The other park sites were just more or less fields out at like Almond Park. There used to be next door. It's gone now, but there was it was called La Vista School. They used to have like a continuation high school, I think it was there, and so the park was just a field that was next to it that had a pond at the bottom of it that would basically, when they pumped the irrigation, they would almost drain the pond, and then overnight they had a pipe that would refill, kind of like a toilet valve that would kind of fill back up. The pond would refill mostly, after they irrigated it, but it was otherwise just kind of a gopher patch, like everything else, mostly was at that time. There was, sports facility wise and stuff, there wasn't much of anything.
So once you figured out what you had and where everything was, did you reach out to the community next, or did you already have some ideas before reaching out?
I think that we probably we started meeting with different. My goal at that time, because what I found was there was just a tremendous disconnect between the local community and the people that were taking care of the parks, or the county in general. Really, we were just kind of the poor stepchild, out in the middle of nowhere. And some people liked it that way. Honestly, they didn't really want to have anything to do with the county or become a city or any of that. They were just happy, kind of being that. But then there were other people that were tired of having to go to Citrus Heights or go to Folsom or whatever, Roseville, depending on where you were in Orangevale, to take your kids to a swimming lesson or to play soccer or softball or baseball or just whatever, those kind of local activities. You had to go pay another agency, so none of that money was coming back to the community. So I think that's probably was one of the first things that I did, was find out who the players and if you want to call it that, the agencies in the community. We talked about it a little bit earlier. There were various people, whether it be the little leagues or I don't think soccer was even around then that I can recall much of, but Little League was already around. We did have there where the youth center was. There was also a building down there, a block, little masonry thing that had kind of a snack bar, roll-up window, and a tool equipment shed at the other end. No restrooms or anything there. So we got with those people. They had a lot of other. There was a group called Preserve Orangevale Country Life, who they were primarily people that were north of like Central Avenue, and certainly north of Oak Avenue, but some in between, and who were just as their name implied, they were very serious about maintaining the current zoning regulation, because there was a lot of, it kind of graduated as you went from Central Avenue and going north. It kind of, there was a lot of 1 acre stuff and then some 2 acre, then it got to 5 acre. And then by the time, that you got out to like Cherry and stuff like that, it was, 10 acres and stuff like that. And there were still there were still quite a few orchards and everything that were dotted along the way. So that was kind of my first thing was to find out who was who and what what they wanted and what their expectations for me, and they made those quite clear about what they wanted to see in the community. We later on we had a lady who we lost kind of recently. Her name was Alice Amantea. She became on the Park District Board later, but when I first met her, she was on the PTA, and so we went and talked to them about, because the schools that they had, the elementary schools primarily that were around, were the same thing. They had school buildings and all that, but the fields but they they had property, but they were just gopher patches. There was no manicured sports fields or anything even close to that they had. And so later, kind of down the road, her and I, we went and met and with some people from the San Juan School District, and it was funny because we were in a classroom that had those chairs for like third graders. Yeah. So we're all sitting in these chairs that are barely, like those little beach chairs that you sit in, and we're talking about possibly trying to do a joint venture with them, because they had land that we didn't have, and so we thought it could be a real bonus if we went in and we developed the land, as far as actually in some cases grading it a little bit, but mostly just putting in an irrigation system and putting in turf grass and stuff like that we would maintain it in exchange for them allowing us to use it for programs. So during school hours, they would do whatever they did on it, and then after school hours, then we would utilize it for sports programs.
So was that? Oh,
I think that still exists over at Orangevale Elementary.
It still exists in several places. It still exists at Pasteur Junior
Coleman
High, at Coleman Elementary, and so then it was called Palisades. Now it's a charter school of some kind.
Oh.
Whatever, Golden Valley, I think, something like that. I think it was called Golden Valley. Anyway, it used to be Palisades Elementary School. That was out in the kind of the southeast area of Orangevale. So it's that is still in existence. I think that they have over the years just kind of continued or extended that lease, if you want to call it that, and then there were a lot of other things. It was kind of funny because the county park district, if you want to call it then, there were a couple of schools, like the one out at Palisades, that the park district owned property that was directly adjacent to it. And same thing at Palisades, and there were a couple of other ones anyway that just for some oddball reason, the park district ended up with like a pie-shaped, piece of land that was basically landlocked and worthless. Mm-hmm. Where eventually we kind of made a trade and said, to the schools, like, we'll give you this, and then if we can do this, kind of horse traded on some of that, that stuff.
So I spoke to Joyce before, and she told me about what it took to get the building there for Parks and Rec. And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that so that I could find out how you guys ended up with an actual office building.
You're talking about the community center?
Yes.
Well, prior to that, it was really an interesting time, and it was a divisive time too, because we had a different administrator then. Her name was Leanna Earhart, and just a brilliant, really smart lady. She had come to us, I think, from Rancho Cordova prior to that, but she'd been in the parks business, and I think grew up as a lifeguard and stuff like that, but real smart in that way. And so there were a lot of agencies at that time that were using kind of a little niche because California has some interesting laws when it comes to taxes and changing property taxes and things like that. It's very restrictive, thankfully, in some cases. But so there was kind of a little niche in that law that they that they had that was just called a landscape lighting and assessment district. And so our attorneys and different attorneys, even though the attorneys that worked for us worked for most all of the other park districts around too, the independent or dependent ones like we were. And so they kind of said, well, here's the deal, you know, we can actually form this assessment district, and for, you know, just per parcel, it was a small amount of money.
$42 a year.
Yeah. So $42 a year, and that covered, I think, something about 9,000 resident properties or something like that.
Close to that.
So anyway, it came so when they brought that to the park district board, because really it was going to be either same old, or we do something different, you know, for the future of the community. And so they started holding some public hearings, and it was interesting too. I'll tell you just a side story of that. When you talk about buildings, our first the community center, when we didn't have any buildings at all, other than that one I told you about at the youth center. I went to a meeting one time, park districts and all that kind of stuff, and it was in North Highlands. And so I went out there, and we were in this building. It was just kind of a fabricated building, probably was like a triple wide or something like that. But right next door to it, down, you know, they were North Highlands. They were building themselves a new community center with their park district staff and all that was going to move into. So I just had this harebrained idea, and I said, what are you guys going to do with this building, you know, when you move into that building? And they said that they were just going to tear it down and do away with it to make a parking lot. And I said, if I asked them if I could have it, and it looked at me like I was crazy. And I probably was. But anyway, after a little wrangling, they said, okay, because they felt for us, you know, we were kind of in the same boat as them, really just kind of getting off the ground. So they said, yeah, you can, if you move it, you can have it. So
1984.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So I went back and at that time, I think maybe still Ron probably, and said, hey, I was at this meeting, and they said I could have this community center if I can move it. And he said, okay, well, how do you propose to move it? And I said, right down Greenback Lane, from Elkhorn, right down Greenback Lane. We'll hire a house mover. They'll cut it in half, or you know, and load it on whatever they do. And so it was quite the undertaking. Of course, we had to obviously get a permit, because we had to have people come out there and lift up power, because they literally put this thing on some flatbed trailers, drug it right down Greenback Lane. So people had to come out from the county and lift up power lines and stop traffic at intersections and all. We had House Movers was the name of the company. They that moved it. And in the meantime, next to the youth center, just south of the youth center, was part of the land that we had there that was just undeveloped. So we kind of graded off a spot where the maintenance shop is now. We just kind of graded off a spot there, and they came and put that building back up again over there. So that was our first community center.
So we got to move out of this little office space in the youth center into that building.
It was like by the time we got done with it, it was a grand, you know, it was a beautiful, it was better than anything we ever had.
Yeah.
You know, so it was great.
How long was it in that state? How long were you guys in that building?
Well, eventually the building, I mean, since the people at North Highlands had already determined that it had outlived its usefulness, we probably had another 10 years in that.
Yeah, until the community center was built.
In that thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly, you know, we got our money's worth out of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's from 1984 to 1996.
Yeah, until the community center was probably
built.
ready to go. But getting back to your original question about that, and when I was saying it was a very divisive, and they would hold community, you know, meetings, hearings, it was really difficult, because there were a lot of people that just did not want anything to do with this property tax assessment. I mean, it took a toll on, I think, you know, some of the board members on literally their neighbors quit talking to them, and it really took a physical, mental toll on a lot of them. But at the end, they decided to go forward with it. So which basically meant that they would have a like an, what do you call that thing? They sent like an election kind of a thing. They would send out basically whenever the time, I don't know if it was like in November when they vote or whenever it was, but they would send out something to every resident, so the residents could all, vote yes or no on it. And it was kind of a glitch. I mean, not glitch, but it was kind of set up in the system where, because it really was just like a postcard thing that so a lot of the people just took that thing and threw it in the trash. But that was a yes vote because the way that these assessment districts were set up, you had to have 51% of the people say no. So if people didn't physically say no, then they were a yes. So it, hey, welcome to America. But so it passed, and then they were able to, once that all took place, and then the county was able to start having that tax collection and so on. Then we got serious about what we were going to do. We knew that a community center was going to be probably the first thing that we would want to be able to fund. They set this thing up on a bond, like 20 years or 25 years. It was going to be a bond that they were going to borrow $4 or $5 million, I think, and pay it back over 20 years of this assessment district. And right across the street from the youth center, where the community center, where the sports fields there are now in the community center, that was a privately owned piece of property there. And then there was a church that was north of it. And the property then was just kind of a big hill.
Yeah, it was on, Leanna Earhart had tried to purchase that piece of property. It was the Anselmo McNabb property. It was 14 acres. And just before the Park District was able to get funds for it, the Church of Latter-day Saints bought the property. So then, if we wanted to be able to purchase that property, we had to purchase it from them, if they would allow us. So it was a long, drawn-out procedure, and people didn't want us.
We threatened to sue them.
Yeah, people didn't want us to take land that was...
We were going to, literally, we got the county involved, and they kind of threatened to do one of those.
Eminent domain.
Yeah, we were going to eminent domain it, So, and the people at the Church of Latter-day Saints, and I worked with many of them down there. They really are just some of the greatest, people, and they were very community oriented, and they didn't want that. The last thing they wanted was a public squabble with the Parks Department over this land. They knew, and eventually they went much further north and bought property there. So we did end up purchasing that property, and then it was kind of a chain. After that, we ended up with the property then just north of that, and now even where we are here. This was a church property, a Baptist church. Had been several at the time, but I had talked to. But anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So that's really once we were able to secure the property across the street where the community center and the sports fields sit, then we were really able to sit down and think of what were we going to do first. And obviously first was the building itself, and so we got started on that. So it was kind of a multi-year process of doing the community center, and then doing the sports fields out there, and then a couple of years later, the pool. And it was, we had of course back then we built the community center for $1.1 million. It would probably cost you $10 million today, maybe more.
And actually, we did get a grant. It was AB 271.
Yeah.
Gave us $1.2 million to purchase the land, and then
to build the community, actually
we have to
hire some architects and stuff to build the community center itself. But like I say, we built the community center for basically about $1 million. It's the building, and then a couple of years later, the swimming pool. And again, we built a swimming pool complex for about $1 million to complete those things. So it was the construction. It was probably about a 5-year total period of construction of the community center, the sports fields, and then the pool. And it was probably, I don't know, it was probably around like 99 before everything was probably done.
Yeah, because the community center,
Well, we moved in 96.
moved in 96.
Yeah.
Yeah, the grand opening dedication was April 20th of 1996. And then after that, they started working on the ball fields.
And then 2 years in the pool,
Yeah.
a couple years later after that. So.
And then by the time it was the millennium, everything was completed?
Yeah,
Yep, that's
pretty
such a
much.
nice
And
beginning.
there were a lot of other, it was there was just a lot of stuff, going on at that time for the park district, really. As far as all that kind of development going on, the stuff that we had talked about at the schools, we started doing some of that stuff where we were working with the school district, where we were upgrading the facilities, and it was still just there were still just 3 of us that were the staff. I think I did by then probably I had another one more maintenance guy or something, but we were still contracting either with those same agencies that had been doing the maintenance, or then after a while we wanted to really have more control than what we were getting as far as when we wanted service done and how we wanted it done and that kind of thing. And the people, Dick Ferret, who was the superintendent at that time for the Sunrise Recreation and Park District, because they were the 80% of everything that we were doing was through them. He was just a tremendous guy. You'd have thought that he would have been, somebody that would be, because he didn't have to be nice to me, right? Because we were taking, we were taking about a third of their parts,
Mm-hmm.
and but he was just the opposite. He was so kind to me, and just anything that I can do, just ask, and so that really was he was a tremendous person. He's gone now, but it was a really tremendous guy.
So it took 16 years to have a building, a community center, a pool, and then the sports fields. What, under you guys' tenure, what did how many parks were there? Because I think you guys started out with three parks, I believe.
Well, we had more. I think there was
small ones.
Yeah, there was like 7, I believe, and
there's
that we
Pecan Park,
had,
Almond Park.
and we had the it was called Snipes Pershing.
Snipes Pershing.
Yeah, we had the park there, and of course the Orangevale Community Park, the youth center, and we had the
Almond Park. That was part of it.
Almond Park, and then we had some other places that were just plain old undeveloped land that we had under the power lines out near Fair Oaks Boulevard and stuff. So we had, you wouldn't call them parks, but so we did have some land back then, very few developed park sites. But we did have some other properties
That were, say, turned into fields.
Turned into fields, or turned in some cases. I know that the area that they have now, that's out near Fair Oaks Boulevard, is because there's been a lot of people. In fact, I saw you didn't do it, but somebody here did an interview with Manny Mraz, right? Mm-hmm. Who has been a part of the park board and in the community, for a long time. And him and some other people that were really proponents of trail systems and having connections so that you could get Orangevale. The streets back then, and a lot of them even today, didn't and don't have sidewalks, and so they were concerned about kids going to, because Orangevale was full of schools. Like I say, back in the day, probably in the big Aerojet boom and bust days. I mean, there were elementary schools on every corner around here. And then eventually, as demographics changed and all that stuff, then some of them just closed and went away, and some others became charter schools and you know, and stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting that, you know, what we had and how we got it.
Aside from you establishing the community center and your pool and your field, is there a big project that you're particularly proud of making it happen?
Oh, I think that the community center complex changed this whole community, really.
Yes.
Because I remember I was a guy named Charlie Clark, who's gone now too, good friend, and he he was on the park board too for quite a while, but before that he was involved with the chamber, and then I had kind of immersed myself into the Chamber of Commerce, and like I told you about a lot of the people in the community that I tried to get to know, and so he at that time, Orangevale, because we just have what they call an honorary mayor, and so there would always be an election, which basically meant that you would run around trying to raise money. So you would hold hot dogs, you know, little things or little events and all that kind of stuff, right, to give you money. And then at the end of this period of time, of like 2 or 3 months, whatever that honorary mayor's race was, then the person that had generated the most money was the mayor. And so Charlie Clark, this was in 85, 86 or somewhere right around 86, 86, whatever, it was somewhere right around there. But he was the honorary mayor. So he had convinced me that I should run for mayor. And so I said, okay. And so I enlisted, you know, and I had only been in the community for really a few years, so I didn't have a lot of institutional help, you know, people or family or that kind of stuff. But I had made a lot of friends, and so and one of them was a lady named Sandy Mays, and her husband Rick. And Sandy's father, he owned a business on Main Avenue that was called the Meat Shop. His name was Tom Fowler. And so Tom had the meat shop over there. He was a great guy. I used to stop in all the time and bum jerky off of him and different things like that from his store. Really good guy. And so we decided we were going to do, as a fundraiser at the Orangevale Community Park, there used to be, where the disc golf course, the front of the disc golf course is now by the tennis courts, there used to be just kind of a picnic area that had a whole slew of wooden tables, had about 20 wooden tables all there. And that we were going to do a luau, you know, to raise money. And so Tom Fowler, he cooked a pig and brought it out there, and it was a great, you know. So anyway, I ended up winning. I ended up winning the election, so I was mayor in 87, 88, whatever that period of time was. And we had to have, so when it came time to celebrate that, I decided that we were going to do a mayor's ball, and we didn't have any place to do it, but we did it at the Grange.
Oh.
The Grange Hall was really, if there was going to be an activity of any size, you know, for whatever reason, if it wasn't something that was a function of the school, then it happened at the Grange Hall, because it was, you know, school, the church, or the Grange Hall, and that was, you know, that was really the kind of ad hoc community center was the Grange Hall. It's still same building and where it is now.
Joyce, I see that you have some news article clippings that you brought.
Well, these are just photos, news articles with Chuck in them.
Pictures of me,
Yeah.
mostly.
Oh, I was just wondering if any of them have an interesting story that we could talk about.
This is
That we
the
haven't
park
covered.
improvements.
Yes.
We did some park walkthroughs, which was opened up to the community. And it was either Chuck or your brother-in-law, Chris, that did the walkthroughs with Ron McRoberts, and just to get ideas from the community of what they would like to see built or, you know, constructed in each of these parks.
What did it seem like the community really wanted?
Nothing.
Oh, wow, okay.
Well, she's right to a great
community
extent.
park, yeah.
But then there was also, because like when I was talking about that Orangevale is just that the way that it's made is it's very urban the further south that you go, and then it becomes way more rural the further north you go. So those communities didn't really have much to do with each other. there was one portion of the community, the south end of the community, where it was very rural. I mean, very urban. I'm sorry. The house, it's very small lots and a lot of houses and all that kind of stuff. They wanted stuff. We ended up at Pecan Park. We ended up building a bicycle BMX track.
Oh, wow.
Over there, right? And it was really we had a guy that lived either across the street or down the street or something that his kids were like world champions.
It was a nice track.
So he was very involved in it, and there were a lot of kids that would always just come to the park and just ride through they'd go out and it was very dangerous, but they would dig a hole, take the dirt, and then make a hill, right? So you had a hole that you couldn't see just to make a hill that you could jump off of on a bicycle, right? So we finally decided it would be much safer to have them, instead of having them digging holes all over the parks, to just construct an actual BMX track. So this guy, Steve Hoff, he had a lot of expertise in that kind of a thing. So we just started, talking to people and people he knew and blah, 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 to bring dirt. Because, the starting hill on this thing was like 15 feet high, and it kind of, went down and looped around and had, jumps and everything along the way. And it wasn't a problem initially because there were mostly cows that were next door. Then they hadn't built any of the houses there on the north side of Pecan Park yet. There was still one house there, but then it was like they had acreage and stuff there, so there was just cows over there. So they built this thing, and it became very popular. Kids would come from all over the place, and they would ride in all hours.
Yeah,
they'd be out there at midnight.
So Stephen Carroll Huff then actually had sanctioned activities doing the BMX track and races for kids. So that brought a lot of the younger kids in there to have fun and race. And it was competitive, and they won prizes,
trophies, and it certainly was not nationally, of course, but California. It was a sanctioned track, and they held competitive events and stuff there, and it was pretty incredible, really, what they were able to do over there. And like I say, they would be on that thing 24 hours a day. Kids out there.
So that caused a problem.
All time of night. So eventually we had to, we thought, well, we've got to get some control over this thing. So we'll just put a fence around it, so that we can go out there in the morning at, 8 o'clock or something and open it and go back at 8 o'clock at night or whatever and then close it. Well, that wasn't really much of a barrier because I think the day after we put the fence up, it got cut in about 3 places, and they were out there till midnight again. And it was an ongoing battle. And then eventually, when they sold the property to the north of it, and they built houses on it, then it became a real problem because now there were literally 2-story houses just separated by a fence from this BMX track that went on.
Neighbors were not pleased.
Yeah, they weren't pleased. And so. It's still, we kind of fought it off for as long as we possibly could, but eventually it was just, costing us, the park district, not when I say us, I'm always referencing the district, not me personally. It just became a financial problem that, that we were having to hire lawyers because the neighbors were suing us and
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was too bad because it was a great thing.
It was too much of a good thing, apparently.
It was too much of a good thing,
Yeah.
and if it was probably out in the middle of nowhere, which it kind of was initially, but I don't know where middle of nowhere is anymore. But they had
That picture, does that look like a park?
yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of there were a lot of people on the north end of Orangevale that were adverse to any change at all. And then there were people to the south that had a lot of kids that wanted something for for their kids to do. So it was a good thing for a long time. But eventually it kind of just ran its course, and we had to tear it down.
What year did you guys build it? Because I'm not from here,
Does
so
it say that, Ken?
I was looking for a year.
Um,
Was it in the 80s or 90s?
But if it was late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Steve would know.
It was somewhere right around that
Probably
time.
1990, probably.
Yeah. If it was either very, very late in the 80s or early in the 90s.
Because it was when their son was old enough, or
Yeah.
young enough
So
still.
it was around that time.
But it was a good thing for Pecan Park while it lasted, because prior to that, Pecan Park was kind of like a drug hangout.
Oh no. Okay.
And, the neighbors on the other side, of the homes that had been there for a long time, not the newer ones, were upset because they couldn't take their kids there and feel safe.
Yeah, it was kind of just like a party, like a party park. And,
I wouldn't think there was such a thing like that long ago. I didn't realize.
Except for Pumpkin Paul's.
Yeah,
He had the adjacent property.
Oh,
that's right.
Remember that?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he was to the west off of Hazel Avenue, and then just on the south tip of where Pecan is, his property was in over there. So, but when everything else around that area was pretty urban. I mean, it was tight, small lots and small lots and a lot of houses and stuff like that.
Out of curiosity too, just because this brought up the idea of, unforeseen consequences or whatnot, because this is a generally fire safe area, but we still have to take precautions against fires. What maintenance goes into that when taking care of all the parks?
Well, we had fires. We had and mostly they were all, fortunately, small. The Orangevale Community Park itself, that park was real important to the community. I know way before I ever came, and I'm talking back in probably the 50s and stuff like that. And I know there's people have spoke on it and record of it that the different organizations like the Orangevale Women's Club that, like I say, is probably 110 years old now. I made a joke one time. I got in trouble because when I said the Orangevale Women's Club is 110 years old and some of the original members are still there. I didn't go over too good, but I really meant it in the best way because they really are great. It literally goes back. So 100 years ago, literally there were people that would sell cookies and stuff like that, and have fundraisers to be able to contribute to making improvements to that Orangevale Community Park, really. And so when I was talking about meeting with the groups like the Preserve Orangevale Country Life and some of the other people that really were protective of the open space and horse property, and there was a lot of horses and stuff back then. I had a meeting with them, and they made it really clear to me. They said that there's a 30-acre section of the park that runs along Oak Avenue over there. You have the disc golf course that's to the west of it, and then the landscape park now that's to the east of it. But in the middle, there's a 30-acre parcel there. And they made it real clear to me that if I did proposed anything development-wise, because there were horse trails and all things through there, that I'd turn up missing,
Remember that the Desonic family?
They still lived around.
They're still there.
Yeah, and but I'm just saying that just the group of the people that lived, that because it was just a jewel for us here, I mean, unless you and Joyce is an equestrian, they would ride, and they had what's the name of the little the Twin Lakes Riding Club is. They still have their property.
Yes, they do.
So they still have a little equestrian club and a small arena and everything off of Peerless. Peerless and Cherry, somewhere right up in that area. But anyway, they were just super protective of that period. And they said, we'll fight to the mat. And these women, they were serious. You didn't mess with these women because you would turn up missing. You'd be out in somebody's pasture, and that'd be the last time somebody saw you. And I'm I'm kind of being half serious when I say it. But anyway, but over time, I agree. I came to be an ally for them, and I would never. And even now, there is not a stitch other than we have replaced some of the bridges, because back then there really weren't even any bridges. If you were on a horse, you just went down through the creek and back up the other side. But for the walking trails, we did some projects with like Eagle Scouts and different things like that, where we actually went into that area, and we got it approved by the ladies, where we actually went in and did put in a walking equestrian pathway that made of decomposed granite. So we put bridges in so that it would be handicap accessible, and it was a big hit. When we did that, people just came from everywhere. We used to be able to. I got super involved in the botanical part of it, right? I talked to people from even the Native American community about it. They gave me some books and stuff to be able to say that, like these plantain and these other certain berries and what their relationship was to tribal people that lived in that area. And there were, still evidence of that there then. So they would tell me kind of, here's what's there. And so we knew that we didn't just go through and, spray Roundup on a bunch of stuff, so we did have to do that with some of the poison oak, because that got to be a real problem. But primarily we really maintained a lot of the original, plants and all that stuff that had been, and that was kind of unique about that area, is that it had never been, to my knowledge, it had never been grazed. So typically if you have an open air, an area of any kind that gets grazed, especially if there's goats on it, there'll be nothing left down to the dirt almost. So whatever native plants and stuff there may have been would be gone. But this particular area, it had never been, as far as I know, had never been grazed. So a lot of those still original plants and native plants and vernal pools and things like that were still there.
I know, I love taking my daughters there. That was when I first moved here, I didn't even know about the park, and I took them there, and I was just so excited that it just existed. And that was very, it seems like ahead of your time to care about the indigenous plants and integrating that with the horse trails. That's really impressive.
It meant a lot to the community.
Yeah.
And they, like I say, they made it real clear that as far as at least that part of the park went, it was off limits. Mm-hmm. And it still is.
Yeah. Well, did you have any big projects towards the end of your tenure at the Parks and Rec that would be fun to talk about? From a development standpoint, I don't, we did a lot of other, things, like where that, I was talking about that old building that we got, that was the first community center. Yes.
Now that is actually, that's like the maintenance, the maintenance yard. When we built that, I was very proud of getting that built, because eventually when we did, after the assessment district and everything was up and running for quite some time, that was one of the other decisions that was difficult, but the park board made, was to go completely in-house, independent from any other agencies. So we weren't contracting with anybody, and we went out and bought a truck and we bought some riding mowers and commercial type riding mowers and stuff like that, but we just kind of had them in a little fenced in area there. So when we were able to build the corporate yard over there now, and I don't know how many maintenance staff, they probably have about, it's seasonal. I mean, they have some regular employees. I have a guy by the name of Doug Fullrot, and Doug, he came to me in probably sometime back in the late 80s, I would guess.
Yeah.
And he came through a program. I don't know what it was called back then, Hearts for something, or it was kind of like where job placement for some developmentally disabled people and stuff like that. Even though he functions fine, but he has some dyslexia and some other issues. But other than that, he's just the greatest guy I've ever known in my life.
And he's still there.
He's still there.
Oh, wow.
And he would. I mean, he's just one of those guys that when it was just him and I, I mean, if a pipe broke in the park and it was time for everybody to get off, him and I literally, if that thing was 10 feet deep, we'd dig a 12-foot hole and shore it up, and if it took us half the night to fix it, then that's what we did. So really probably the last thing that I was probably part of from a development standpoint was that maintenance corporate yard, and I actually had my own office over there. I had a small office next door to Joyce in the community center, but I was able to get the maintenance yard, corporate yard built over there. So I had an office and I had a conference room over there that we could do all of our stuff and hold some safety meetings and different things like that. And so from a development standpoint, that was probably the last big thing. But one thing I do, just kind of in finality of it, is I talked a lot about the community and the people that were involved. It was really incredible. There was just there were a lot of just different people. A guy by the name of Bill Adams and Fred Harris and Jesus and Jerry Solomon. Guy, his name is Louis Brule, but everybody knows him as Concrete Louis. These guys, we used to go. We'd meet. They have when Jan's bar was first put in over there in Greenback. When Jan and Dan actually first put it in, if you wanted to be able to meet with any contractors about anything, you went to like 5 o'clock on Friday, because that's where everybody came in there at like 5 o'clock on Friday. We used to refer to that as kind of the unofficial city hall. So I got to know these guys, right? And more, and their wives. So they'd see me come in there and they were just like, oh, what kind of harebrained idea is this joker got going out? So, because we did, I had a lot of harebrained ideas. I would bring in the North Highlands Community Center down. Nobody would have thought of that. There used to be a lumber store on Greenback Lane called Lumberjacks, where the groceries,
Winco.
Yes, yeah.
Winco.
Winco is now, yeah.
Okay.
It was called Lumberjacks.
Okay.
And so Lumberjacks was closing down, and they had this metal thing that you went through, like when you were going back to the lumber yard with your truck, you had to stop and check in at this thing, and then when you came back out, they would count your boards and make sure you had your receipt and all that kind of thing, right? So it was this covered, cantilevered thing, and so when they were tearing the store down, I worked my same charm. I went in and said, "What are you going to do with this thing?" And they said, "We're going to tear it down." And I said, "Can I have it if I move it?" That was kind of my line, right? And so they said, "Well, we got to talk to corporate." And I said, "I'll give you I had Joyce type me up a fancy letter. And so we gave it to the corporate people. And so they finally said, "Yeah, if you can move it, you can have it." It still stands at where they have the, well, it's not Powwow Days anymore, but over in the central part of the park where they have the fair and the palooza and all that kind of stuff. The big covered shelter is
Pretty nice,
that is the Lumberjacks thing, and these same people that I was telling you about, I would walk in there, and again here he is. What does he want now? So these people were so great, and their wives, whatever. They never charged me a penny. They did like I would pay for the
concrete.
The district. When I say the park district, we would buy the concrete, or in some cases we'd buy some steel, and one of the guys also that used to come in there, a guy by the name of Danny Hubbard, he just happened to run the mechanical shop out at Folsom Prison. So when if we had to get something fabricated and welded up, or I would put the steel on a trailer. I would drive it out to Folsom Prison and give it to Danny, and he'd call me back a week later, and I'd go pick up all fabricated, welded up beams and stuff like that, free, right? Mm-hmm. And then we'd take it back, and then these other people, that names they would come out there and put this thing up and weld it and build it, and they'd be out there working all weekend long, because they had their regular jobs, so on the weekends I'd come out, they'd come out, their whole families, wives would be making sandwiches and blah blah blah, and in some cases wives would be digging holes, and we would, we'd put stuff like that up, and there are several examples throughout the district, mostly at the community center, the Orangevale Community Park, different areas of it, where there are examples of just the community saying, we don't need, we'll do it ourselves.
Weren't you involved in this latest project for the big pathway that connects several parks together?
Well, I was involved in it for my tenure. I've been gone now, been retired for, I think like 6 years or something like that. But that was one of the things that people like Mike Stickney and Sharon Brunberg, who have been, mainstays on the park board, and Manny Mraz, and people like that. It was always kind of the goal was, we touched on it earlier, was getting people off the street on whether it's walking or biking or whatever, and getting a connection, and they actually were able to work through the county and through other agencies, a lot of agencies all got together, Sunrise Park District, us, and literally like Farrell all the way. I think the goal was to get this thing all the way to like downtown, where you could get on without going on the street or light rail or whatever, anything else, that you could physically be on a path and walk from here to, ride a bike from here to downtown. So I spent a lot of time working on that and making that happen. And a lot of it is still, even just now, happening. I think in the last probably several months, and I don't even know if it's quite up and running yet, where the park where Orangevale's property connects to the Sunrise, it's divided by Fair Oaks Boulevard. We're on one side of the street, they're on the other side of the street. They've actually connected now those trailheads to there, and they have a light. You can push the light and cross the trail. So yeah, Ken, that is, it's been a 30-year process, and it's still going, and I think that it'll like my lifetime or not, but I think that vision will happen.
And that's the Arden Cripple Creek trail?
Linda Creek Trail.
Oh, the Linda Creek Trail.
And crosses a few different creeks and stuff over there. But I think that that's made lately, as all the other agencies and stuff I think have bought in. They've been able to get grants. One of the things we've been really fortunate about here, I think anyway, is when it comes to the support of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, the particular supervisor that we would have, whether as Sue Frost, or before her, Roberta McGlashlin, and going all the way back to
Bill Bryan.
Bill Bryan and Roger Nilo and people like that. They were really supportive and continue to be supportive of that. So when we have something going on, they're the first ones there that use whatever political mechanism they have, but they'll get us a $10,000 grant or something else, right, to spoon feed or to sponsor events and stuff that we have here. They've been really committed to the community, and I'm thankful for them.
Well, unless there's any other stories you guys want to talk about, I think this is a good time to wrap up. I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out to let me interview you, Chuck and Joyce. Yeah,
and you can let Joyce finish this, but I'm just proud to see the continuation. How it's what they're doing now, what they're going to do. We talked earlier about what's all the racket going on back here. They're continuing the parking lot. When this property was a church, I used to meet with the pastor, a guy named Steve Nichols, and he was in a wheelchair. But we always, because I used to do favors for them, I'd come back and bring the tractor and grade around here. Same thing with when they first started the food bank. They didn't have nothing over there. So I went and talked to our administrator, and I said, could I take the tractor and go over there and grade that thing out for them, and say, I don't want to know nothing about it. That plausible deniability. Mm-hmm. And so, after work or whatever, I'd drive it from Hazel Avenue. I'd drive my tractor all the way to Main Avenue down Central, and I'd go over there and and grade that stuff, or do stuff for the community. And I think that vibe is just still alive. So that's what I'm proud of.
Joyce, do you want to end it?
I was just going to say the maintenance yard was built after I left, so that was quite a project, and I was really pleased to see that once they took away the old portable building. That's something that the guys definitely needed. No.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited that I got to meet both of you and talk to you.
Well, I'm sure we'll see each other again, because we're, I'm certainly, I might be retired, but I'm not gone. I'm around, and typically if there's a community function going on, you'll either hear my big mouth or see my face at them. I intend to keep being part of the community for as long as I can. Yeah,
and I will say hi, and you guys just stop by anytime and hang out with us.
Oh, this place here, I'm proud of this thing. I never imagined really a history center kind of a thing. But now that it's here, I'm like, there are so many things about this community that I learned about but didn't really know about. I remember the first, when I was even in the Orangevale Park, many back earlier, I'd ask somebody, I go, what's this little ridge that runs through the park, between the park and the elementary school that's there? And it was like, well, back in the day, that was actually a narrow gauge railroad that ran through from the packing sheds, and it would pick up stuff from all the different producers of fruit, whatever they grew. I think peaches was probably at the time, this community was world famous, for the peaches that other things too, but primarily I think it was peaches. That was the big thing. And so, there was a narrow gauge railroad that went through there. And then we didn't talk about it, and it's not really something that we had a lot of involvement in, but the Indian Stone Corral, I think they just call it the Stone Corral now, because Indian is not, politically correct, I guess. So I think they just call it Stone Corral, where there are still many, many native artifacts. It's very limited, but it is in Orangevale's, most of it is in Orangevale's property, but the county still maintains it, and maintains the ownership of it, or, the use of it. But that's a real important part of this community too, that maybe sometime you'll interview somebody that knows a lot about that.
Yeah, I was hoping to in the near future. There was someone who was the son of someone who helped Maxine, and I haven't gotten to lock down a date with him, and hopefully I will. Yeah.
But thank you otherwise. And Oz, thank you.
And you're going to be coming up with the bow of the parade and the Best of Orangevale.
Yes, I'll be at all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And more.
Thanks.